impact of the Supreme Court case Dred Scott v. Sanford led to a chain reaction that was a catalyst to widespread poverty, discrimination, and violence towards blacks. African Americans have always been more susceptible to poverty due to political and social negligence. Following the Civil War was the eruption of violence throughout the U.S. The terminal end began as corruption, but later grew as hatred. This landmark Supreme Court case has impacted the lives of African Americans and is a key factor in the aid of future civil and civic discourse. Dred Scott, born 1795, was inhumanely sold in 1832 to John Emerson. And in 1857, the United States Supreme Court rules that freed African Americans are not citizens. The Dred Scott case led to this idea of discrimination and segregation. Therefore, freed slaves who were hence considered free were not American citizens and were still considered beneath society. All African Americans were characterized as property and as an ownable object. The word free was obsolete. It meant nothing in the way African Americans behaved. Americans thought and acted, then again prolonging a racial advancement. Though a multitude of aspects went into the fight of abolition and the imminent Civil War, Dred Scott v. Sanford propelled the fight to even greater stakes. Disappointment later awaited the newly freed slaves. As they began their journey to towns and cities looking for opportunity and work, African Americans were not yet welcome in the South. They settled on the outskirts of towns and cities where poverty and disease reigned, receiving only low-paying jobs and beginning the never-ending cascade of minority poverty in America. During America's Reconstruction period, 3 million African Americans became free under Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. African Americans became free in the spur of the moment, from leading a life of total obliviousness to a life of self-responsibility. Political leaders let them live their lives beginning in poverty and only some rising through the adversity. Society conceded to the fact that African Americans were free, but during Reconstruction, society never majorly impacted the propelling poverty rate. Without political and societal aid, African Americans would never be free. But freedom for African Americans was merely a state not being enslaved. They were still segregated and diminished of rights in their so-called state of freedom. However, if government efforts were continuous, African Americans could have risen from their impending poverty. Numerous promises were made to African Americans. Though Washington fulfilled those promises, they were corrupted and interrupted by violence and discrimination that ran deep in the post-Civil War Southern lifestyle. As African Americans began to receive rights, they were immediately interrupted due to violence and corruption. The 15th Amendment granted the right to vote to African American males in 1870. Though they were now legally permitted to vote, socially, they were interrupted by the storm of violence at the polls. Following the Civil War was the eruption of the segregationist laws called the Jim Crow laws. They weaseled their way into every part of American lifestyle, corrupting all things, preventing the freedom and citizenship of African Americans. Plessy v. Ferguson had a huge impact that came due to the decision of Dred Scott v. Sanford, leading to this idea of separate but equal. The American people were just now receiving the okay sign by government to presume the racist and discriminatory ways in every way of life. Everything was corrupted for African Americans. This was no free life. This was a life of slavery, though different than the past. This life was a life of withholding rights, withholding protection and safety, and of government leading African Americans into a life of crime and of poverty. Our political leaders corrupted the world of African American life, never giving the chance of redemption. Now African Americans are forever stuck in the cycle of political and social chains. We had a Reconstruction that failed in the midst of interruption and corruption due to the fact that Americans truly believed this idea of racism was okay, that it was normal. But our country must take hold of this new energy and continue to move forward with a focus on a patriotism that inspires its citizens to look for loyalty, unity, and diversity.